Good morning, evening, or afternoon, everybody. We'll give folks a few more minutes to show up. There's a link to the agenda if you want to put your name down. And so I've been pretty lax about this in meetings for the past couple of weeks because it's hasn't been as necessary, but I'm going to have to do a lot more active listening, which means I'm not really going to be able to spend as much time updating the notes. So could somebody volunteer to be a note taker and be forever in my good graces? Thank you, Jeff. This starts to get really important as we get closer to burn down and in burn down when we start like making decisions because of the amount of time it takes me to process and upload recordings. It's so much better if we have the decisions written down someplace first that we can look back on. Okay, I think we have everybody here. And nobody's told me I'm on mute yet, so I think you can hear me. So I'll do the doodly-doo where I say, hey, everybody. Today is Monday, February 11th, 2019. I'm Aaron of Sigbeard, and this is the Kubernetes 1.14 release team weekly meeting. This is week 6. We're participating in a publicly recorded discussion about the release, so we're going to be adhering to Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which boils down to don't be a jerk. And we can all watch ourselves not being jerks on YouTube later. We are at the halfway mark of the release. Yay, how's everybody feel about that? I see quiet golf clap from Jeff. Okay, awesome. So current status, I went ahead and finally got around to making a shared calendar for the release. It's linked in the release notes, and I'll PR this into the release thing shortly. I apologize for the calendar flail that may have happened with mass deleting and mass adding invites. There are probably a few more of those to come when I set up calendar invites for the burn down meetings. I took a best guess at the appropriate level of ACLs for the sundry mailing lists that we have. So historically, we used a mailing list called Kubernetes Milestone Burn Down, which included people in the release team, people not in the release team, people in SIG release, people not in SIG release. The place to go to for trying to change it around this time on a mailing list that.
Aaron, you might want to turn off your camera because you're having the you're going Daft Punky again.
Okay, how's that sound? Okay, thank you for that. So basically, let me find the issue. I tried to sort of write down what I think all of the ACLs are supposed to be for all of the various mailing lists, because every time I kept trying to change things around, I had random people ask me like why they didn't have access. So I'm trying to document it and then follow it consistently. Please hold, internet. So I'm pasting a link in chat. So I think that's the way it's supposed to be. The real tricky thing here is I'm trying to remove people who have direct access to docs as part of this. So if you were listed as having direct write access to the enhancement spreadsheet or the CI signal report, I removed you because you should be in the Kubernetes release team group, which should give you direct edit access to docs. And if that's not working, let me know and we'll revisit that. But the goal is everybody on the release team, leads and shadows, should be in the release team Google group, which should give them access to all the things. The shared calendar is editable by the SIG release chairs because the release team is a SIG release project, and myself and the release lead shadows. And then the major milestones like code freeze, code thaw, and all that good stuff are shared with the community calendar. So it shows up with all the other community meetings. Next bit of Administrivia is Mike Arpaia is not here, but he's going to be leading an EU-friendly time zone version of this meeting, which will happen Tuesdays at 4 p.m. GMT, 8 a.m. Pacific time. That seems to be the option that everybody voted for the most in the doodle. So I created a recurring Zoom meeting, did all the needful. Does everybody have the invite for that? Does that all look good? I'm seeing general head nods. And then as far as how to run the meeting, my suggestion based on what I've heard from other release leads in the past is you don't necessarily need to copy paste the full agenda that has callouts from all of the different roles. Instead, maybe the meeting could go something like just reviewing all of the callouts from the Monday meeting. And then if there are any open questions or discussion, we can write all of that down. So I wrote all that in the issue about the EU release meeting, and I'm assuming if the first one goes well tomorrow, we can close that issue out and call it done. The final large thing for me, and this is kind of where I need everybody's help, is now that we are in week 6, we start to focus on what is the shape of this release? What does it actually look like? And is it on target? So we're going to start by looking at all of the caps. And I asked everybody to put in a test plan in the cap. And I also asked everybody to put in some considerations for upgrade, downgrade, and most importantly for us, a checklist that said, yes, whether or not this feature is good to go. And what I need is everybody to actually read that checklist and make sure it's workable for you. So enhancements. Does the KEP make sense? Do you understand what the feature is? Will you be able to talk competently about this feature to comms as we decide what the top 5 enhancements are to talk about for this release? CI signal. Does the test plan in the KEP actually look good? Could you look at that test plan and say, yes, I know whether or not this features or this enhancement's tests have been written, and I know whether or not this enhancement is passing its tests. Issue triage. Are you going to be able to identify all of the issues that are related to this enhancement? And then myself and pretty much everybody, does the checklist actually make sense? Oh, wait, let me call out another thing. Docs and release notes. Like, are docs and release notes part of the graduation criteria? Are you going to know whether or not this enhancement has been sufficiently documented as specified in the CAP? So I'm going to really need everybody's input on this as we start to actually use CAPs now that we've asked everybody to provide CAPs. Any questions? Okay. My goal is to be quiet now and do as much listening as possible. So with that, I'm going to hand off to Claire to talk about enhancements.
Hey, everyone. So we have for enhancements, we are 40 currently tracked, and of those 40, 38 have a KEP linked that the PR has been merged for. The 2 that don't submitted exceptions, and those exceptions were approved. And in addition to those 2, there were 7 additional, or in addition to those 2, there were 5 additional exceptions approved for a total of 7. we have 12 alphas, 14 betas, 10 stables. And this week, what I'll be focusing on will be, as Aaron just mentioned, reviewing KEPs, the status and content. And we also want to start following up on open PRs in KK for each enhancement to see, as we get closer towards burn down, how are these open PRs tracking? Are they looking like they'll be merged, or is anything starting to look more at risk? Any questions from anyone on the call?
So I think I called out something like there were 12 enhancements that weren't in implementable status. What's the plan to address those?
Yeah, so we're going to follow up with all 12 of those. So far, I've hit a couple this morning, and the responses I've been getting have been, oh, we haven't updated the PR. We need to go do that. So continuing to follow up on those just to check if it is all missing PRs or if there are some that still need work to become implementable.
Okay. I'd also been doing a bunch of grooming on the enhancements spreadsheet. Does anybody here besides Claire and the enhancement shadows look at the enhancement spreadsheet? I'm not seeing anybody say yes.
I've looked at it. I've looked over it a few times just to look at information, but haven't given it a fine-tooth comb, pass over anything.
I think my internet skipped at the wrong time. Okay, I'm just wondering, like, when I look at it, there's lots of stuff there that doesn't seem to be like useful, or it looks like maybe additional noise. And I'm just wondering how much leeway I have in suggesting changes to it to try and make it easier to parse at a glance. So I would like, for example, I suggested, thank you for the lazy link. Like I suggested we change the KEPs column, so instead of linking to PRs for the KEPs, it now calls the status out for the KEPs. That's how I noticed which was implementable and which was something else. And then I think because we have KEPs for everything, we probably don't need proposals for everything. And then like from an issue triage perspective, where I had asked, like, are you going to know like which issues are related to an enhancement? There are columns in the enhancement spreadsheet that are for like all of the Kubernetes PRs. I don't know if anybody uses those.
I know for docs we track, needs docs, docs ready to review, kind of on the far right side of the enhancements. But I mean, that's very minimal. It could be moved out. I mean, I'm open to suggestions if you want to kind of rehash what that looks like, Aaron.
Like, I also don't want to mess with people's world if it's like it's in a place where they like it, they use it, they need it, but it's confusing to me. So I'm trying to make it more useful to me personally. I just want to make sure I'm like not stepping on people's toes and people feel as though they can volunteer changes to make their lives more useful, or make their lives better, make the tools more useful for them. Okay.
As a user of the spreadsheet, this is Lockie. I think the changes you've made make the user experience a little bit easier. So thank you for making them. I think just having the state going to KEP has made it easier. We used to track, obviously, community proposals before that, which added a lot of confusion.
Okay. Claire, unless you had anything else to add, I guess I was going to hand off to CI Signal.
Yeah, I think that's all for me if there are no other questions.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Maria, would you like to talk to us about this week's CI Signal?
Sure thing. So things at the moment in master blocking, we have two sort of like consistently failing jobs. And as we were stepping into the call, there was another one just starting, but it could be if like I need to triage it a bit better. The master upgrade is looking a little more concerning in that there are 5 jobs failing at the moment. They do boil down to the same test failure, so we need to follow up with SIG-Auth, SIG network, and SIG cluster lifecycle. The reason that I'm a little bit more worried for these is that especially the 2 first ones have been failing for quite a while, so we'll work together with the SIGs this week to see if we can unblock them. I think this is mostly it in terms of CI signal at the moment. I did have a question because I realized that I haven't seen this until now. In terms of getting input for like CI signal related input for new enhancement, is that something that happens? So is it a conversation that happens with the release team, or how do we find out the test plans?
All of the test plans should be called out in each of the CAPs. So if you go through the enhancements spreadsheet, the CAPs are linked in the CAP state column. So the word is the CAP status. So if implementable, great, you should definitely have that. And then in that CAP should be a heading called test plan.
Okay, brilliant. We'll spend some time this week then to see how that integrates with existing. Yep.
Okay. How can we help escalate the urgency of these test failures?
It's a good question. So we've spoken, I've just pinged folks on Slack. I could speak directly to chairs if that helps. I'm not sure what would help them a bit more.
How involved have your shadows been in doing this level of communication?
I mean, for these specific ones, I've sort of pinged the SIGs on Slack, but we've all sort of shared how this happened. Like I've pinged them. Sorry, I've talked to my shadows about the conversation. They've seen it happen in real time, and then my shadows have followed up on other issues. So in terms of following the process, they've been very involved for these 2 specific issues. I happened to do it. Was that the question? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure you're not bottlenecked and we're making good use of everybody here.
Yeah, so they've been sort of like in public channels at the moment. We haven't spoken in private chats or anything like that until now, at least. I'm not sure if there's anything else we can do to unblock the SIGs, because I assume, I don't know, they're quite busy.
Okay, that's fair. I guess the other reason I was asking was just acknowledging you're in a European time zone, and that some of the people we need to ping are in a US time zone.
Yep.
Okay. All right, let's try keeping an eye on that and see if we can get a little bit more green by the end of this week. First half of the release, I think generally folks have been a little more lax about this. It has always driven me nuts that we cut release builds even though the tests are failing. I focused my energy on making sure everybody had a KEP rather than focused on everybody had passing tests. But now we're going to sort of start to flip over to we really, really, really need passing tests, especially as we get closer to burn down and code freeze. It's going to be really helpful to know what is actually failing for real because somebody introduced a change that broke things versus what are failures that are meaningless. Okay, thanks for the update, Maria. Let's move on to Nico. I think, are you here to talk about bug triage?
Greetings. Yeah. So metrics look normal. Some issues, PRs merged, some new opened. And there's still, I think, 3 weeks until freeze. So there's the automation thing going on. I met with half of my team, and there is a draft document I left in the meeting and in the minutes. There's a link there. And there are currently 3 ideas. One is using Kubernetes, which is this dashboard, and extending it to accommodate issues and multiple labels and more filters, altered columns, and also potentially having a manual field for note taking, like keeping some state in the Testin FRA somewhere. And this potentially is the most integrated solution because of the whole Testin FRA automation that exists. And the uses can be for triage issue tracking, but also CI ticket tracking, and also enhancements. For example, as the KPRs on that spreadsheet before, this could be somehow in that dashboard in a better, automatically filled in a better way. Of course, there is work to do for that. The other idea is utilizing Pro and having weekly or daily artifacts of query results against GitHub. And Ibrahim is in the call. It's his idea, so he might be able to explain better.
Hello, everyone. So just to recap, is like it is an expansion on the idea of using current dashboard in Kubernetes to present the status of all the issues that we have in various repos in the Kubernetes organization. The idea was to define the use case of those dashboards. So we were thinking of just to cap the GitHub tokens issues, and just not to go over those since they're used in different projects, is just taking a snapshot on a daily basis or even a smaller interval, like 6 hours maybe, and instead of keeping those, because they are query results, so we just take them every couple of hours, and then we can do all of the processing that we need to do on them. Basically, from the Airtable POC that I saw, and from the previous documents from the previous releases, mostly we need to correlate all of the open issues in the various repositories, just to make sure that they are assigned to the right segs and the right kinds, and that we're following the milestones. Keeping snapshots of the data is also very beneficial later on, so we can actually track how well did we do in different intervals, so based on the release cycle that we have. The idea is that we have a lot of the code in Testin FRA to query GitHub already, and it's used in various areas, either in Tide, in some of the dashboards in Tide or in Kubernetes. So whether that's a new web page in Kubernetes or just a simple, what I was thinking is a simple web application that reads JSON files from Google Storage that has snapshots in the intervals we're talking about, and basically we can either create tables from those that are filterable or sortable, or we can even go a bit further and show graphs and dashboards of various metrics that we're tracking, like burn down of the issues per seg and for other kind of segmentation that we would like to. That's in short. I'm writing a document with some of the specs of the idea just to have it formally in a format that we can discuss. I should be able to share it tomorrow, probably.
That sounds good. Any questions, comments, or concerns from anybody? Okay. So Nico, is there anything we can do to help with the closure of issues? Do you find that there are any issues that aren't moving in the direction you'd like them to move, or are you not at the point where you're shepherding things like that?
It's still relatively early. That point will be in a couple of weeks from now when the announcement is made that code freeze is coming, etc.
Okay.
At that point.
Okay. Next, finding the doc here. Okay, thanks for that update. Amit, would you like to talk to us about Testin FRA?
Sure. It's been an exciting week for Testin FRA, starting with the PRs we merged. We merged about 113 PRs, which is a bit lower than last week, but is significantly higher than our initial weeks. Then we created the PR for setting up the CI jobs for this release. I have a question regarding that, but I'll circle back to it later. Other than that, Dhawal also created a PR for automating most of this work, so future releases will have a much easier time setting up the CI jobs. Regarding PRAO status, PRAO had an outage last week, which was missed mostly because of a bad config update that was causing jobs to be created in the wrong cluster, and that significantly slowed down PRAO's workings. And also we had a official GitHub outage last week that was causing webhooks to be dropped. Circling back to the question that I had, we've historically been having a separate deadline for removing old jobs and adding new jobs. I just wanted to ask if there's really value in that. Maybe Aaron?
Sure. I don't know if anybody else who was previously Testin FRA is on here. I have seen it done that way to be conservative about the amount that we change all at once. So removing the old jobs and making sure those are all turned down is one set of things that you can watch. And then also verifying that the new jobs are set up correctly and work is another set of things. And they're kind of unrelated to each other. But so I've seen it just for ease. Yeah, it's just a smaller change. And I'm a huge fan in general of smaller, more frequent changes. But it's your Testin FRA. You roll how you want. If I start seeing a lot of bumps, maybe I'll insert some more opinions. But otherwise, like whatever seems to make it easiest for you to operate things and manage change.
Yeah, that makes sense. I asked this question just because now that we are trying to automate most of this stuff, it would be easier if we got rid of the old jobs and added the new jobs in one shot. So it's easier to keep track.
Okay, I mean, that sounds great.
Cool. Yeah, that's all I had from Testin.
Okay. Docs update. Jim.
Yep. Hey, everybody. So it should be pretty quick. Nothing too major to update everyone on. 2 weeks from now is where we say that we need a PR opened. It doesn't need to be the full docs. Just needs to be a placeholder PR. So over the next 2 weeks here, I'll be dividing up the 40 or so caps amongst the shadows and myself. Ends up being roughly, around 8 or so caps per person. Some of them obviously don't require any any changes, but some of them will require a little bit of prodding for docs, and then obviously technical reviews and all that fun stuff. I also picked the release notes team today, trying to sync up with them, and that's mainly due to advice I got from previous docs leads, where they said that they saw the release notes once they went out and saw some features that maybe they didn't see before. Maybe KEP solves this problem, but ultimately the goal is to sync up to make sure there's nothing in the release notes or from what we're seeing that might need docs at the end of the day. So we'll be looking to work hand in hand with them, making sure that everything mends there. Should be pretty good. And then also I was working with Stephen Augustus on creating a PR for the docs handbook. So the release team and myself, we've been working off a HackMD IO doc, and I was talking to Stephen. It sounds like the plan there is to start PRing out in the open, so you can see some progress getting done there. I know a few cycles that's kind of fallen by the wayside, and that's pretty much it for docs as the release goes. And I did have something I wanted to bring up. I took on the assignment of taking a look at the Shadows survey improvements. So I linked the PR in the issue tracker there. And the long and short of it is I plan on sending out a very, very minimal survey. And I know it's kind of a yo dog survey about surveys, but I really wanted to get the release team's feedback on the experience of reviewing the shadows, and then also how we can do a better job at basically recruiting the people who aren't selected or keeping them involved with the community. So that's going to be the long-term goal, and finding the best way to do that kind of with the community consensus there will be what that survey comes out for. So be on the lookout for that. And I wanted to bring it up here in case there's anything that somebody specifically wanted me to include in that survey for feedback. I generally plan on having it be, less than 5 questions, pretty open-ended about how to handle the shadows that weren't selected. Any questions?
That sounds really great. And actually, I don't know how much people care, but I was wondering maybe we could talk about that at the end of this in the open discussion section, just to see how shadows are doing, what's working well, what's not working well, that sort of thing.
Perfect.
Okay. Next up, I think Dave's name is on the agenda for release notes, but I don't think he's the one getting the update.
Yeah, Dave is, he had an issue with his flight today, so I'm going to be giving the release notes update. I'm one of the shadows on release notes. So we are planning to get together this week to talk more about the vision going forward for release notes, I guess, based on some of the discussion that happened last week in the release notes, or the release team meeting, about how release notes could be better suited to the user and give better information for those purposes. And we're planning to jump into the communications blog post call later today to hopefully coordinate better with comms and also docs, as Jim was just talking about, so that the release notes can have a better coordinated overall release notes for the users.
Okay, looking forward to coordinating on that. Has the release notes draft been up? When was the release notes draft last updated?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay, it might be helpful if that's something that's done via like a script or in an automated manner. It would be helpful to maybe have that refreshed before we have our comms meeting.
Okay, yeah, that it doesn't take long.
It was last updated 8 days ago. So either Dave is going to do it once he lands, or I'll ping him and see if one of us needs to do it.
Okay, thanks. Let's see. Natasha, can you give us an update on comms? Is Natasha here?
Yep. Oh yeah, I'm here. Just unmuting. So today, in about an hour and a half, we're going to have a little meeting about the release blog and the key media messages. So as you know, I've invited enhancements, release notes, Aaron, you as the lead, and then the shadows for communications. Of course, anybody on the release team can join this, but those are the key key people that I need to talk to. So we'll go out over the 1.13 blog that we wrote, as well as the media key messages. And then we're going to go over the enhancements list and discuss what the 114 blog should look like, and what questions we need to answer for any media stories that we're doing, as well as the 5-day blog series and which features that should include. Again, the reason I call this a brainstorm is a lot of this will not be really solidified until code freeze, but we want to get kind of a jump start, so we know kind of what we want to track and include in this release blog, and who's going to, what SIGs are going to be responsible for the 5-day series.
Okay, yeah, really looking forward to that. I think that'll be a useful forcing function.
And if anybody on this call is not on that call and would like to be added, please just drop me your email address via Slack or personal message here in the chat, and I can add you to that calendar invite.
I think maybe one question I just want the broader audience to be aware of. We've had issues in the past where larger enhancements have had to drop out later in the release cycle due to stability.
Mm-hmm.
How do we handle that from a comms perspective?
Yep, no, definitely. So at the very top of the release blog, we have people that need to approve this. So obviously, Aaron, you're on there. Enhancements Leads is on there, as well as the different SIGs. So if we're really calling out enhancement features under a certain SIG, so for example, Windows or storage, that SIG needs to sign off on this before we publish. So they can go in and say, actually, this is not accurate, this is not accurate, and then the enhancements lead goes in here and says, this one had to drop out, this one had to drop out. So that's why we have kind of these checks and balances in here. So that way we're all responsible, if you're on this kind of reviewing functions list, to go in here and make sure that the sections are as accurate as possible before we publish.
Okay. And so it also sounds like we're going to want more than a top 5 in case we need to backfill.
Yes, that's part of the discussion, and we actually don't have to do a 5 as well. So for 1.13, one feature dropped out. I think that was Windows. So we did 4 blogs, and then I want to say around 110 is when we had a number of features drop out, and so I think we only had 3 blogs. So it doesn't. We shoot for 5, but it doesn't necessarily have to be 5. So if we can't come up with maybe 7 off the top of our head, and one of those features has to drop out, then we can go down to less than 5 blogs. That's fine.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yep.
Thanks, Natasha. Next up, I think we have Hannes to talk about release branch management, the funnest of fun things.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So tomorrow is the cut for Alpha 3. Nothing special there. I'm giving my shadows right after this call a run through what that is and how you cut the release. Then the other thing is the packaging story. I talked to various people on SIG cluster lifecycle, and they started doing stuff which currently seems to be like checking what's the way forward now. Like how do we build the how do we want to build the packages and so on. That's mainly in the linked issue. There was a lot of discussion going on, and they said they will track their progress there. So I will stay engaged with them on this issue, and yeah, we will see how it goes. I told Tim Sinclair that I don't see anything coming in for this release, but my plan is to set ourselves up so that we can bring in new release stuff in 1.15. And then there is the related question here. So I started, based on the issue where the discussion is now going on, mostly based on that, I started to write in the CAP and try to understand all the bits and pieces, and to the best of my knowledge, how we could move forward. Now, SIG cluster lifecycle does not necessarily want to work on this CAP. The CAP is not merged. The CAP is not in implementable state. So my question is, how do we want to go forward there? I don't know how hard do we want to push on the CAP? Is it fair to tell them you need to update this CAP? Do we just close this CAP and maybe backfill documentation based from this issue.
I would really
I'm-
like to see their work overlap with the KEP because it sounds like this changes the way that things are done. And I really need to understand if any of what they're doing is going to be landing as part of this release.
Yeah. So basically that means we want to force them to create a KEP or at least update the already existing KEP or something like that. Is that what you are saying?
So what's unclear to me is the work that they're doing completely orthogonal to the KEP that you wrote, or is it a subset of it?
It's the thing that I wrote in the KEP. What is still under discussion is like details. Do they use tool A or do they use tool B? And like a lot of details in the KEP are just things I thought about, but not necessarily how it's really implemented in the end. They are currently hashing that out. How does it really look? By like experiments and hashing on stuff on the issue. But
And so
again, I opened the KEP. Sorry?
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, the thing is, I opened the KEP. They never thought they wanna, or they never thought they need a KEP. So they started out on this issue. And now it would either be we tell them, no, you need a KEP, or you need to update my KEP. Or we say, okay, we will close the KEP. We don't force you to use a KEP. And we just kind of check what's in the issue, if you see what I mean.
Okay, that's, I hear that statement. I have seen Timothy Sinclair get a little pushy about this stuff, but again, the forcing function here is if this is a change they want to land in this release, they really ought to have it documented in a KEP. So my personal difficulty is I'm supposed to be on vacation this week, so this isn't something I'm really supposed to allocate a ton of bandwidth to. I can try and have a one-on-one chat, but you have my full authority to push back. Everybody here does.
Okay, I will check with them regarding KEP stuff, and we'll keep you updated in the next couple of days.
Like it's not like I want to stop prototyping and experimenting and stuff. It purely comes down to, is this a change that's going to land as part of this release? If so, I need to see test plan, graduation checklist, all that stuff, so that we can understand if it's actually on target as we approach code freeze.
But I mean, there is currently no KEP. So if they would create a KEP or update the other one, that would be an exception anyway. And do we still accept exceptions? Or is this basically a thing we want to push for 114 anyway? 115, sorry. 115 anyway. Because
I personally haven't had time to look at the scope of all of this. Like, I don't know. My hope, though, is we could, it seems reasonable to ask for an exception, certainly this long before code freeze, and talk about how what they're doing ties into your KEP. And we could say that that is the work that is intended to land in 114.
Okay, I see. I will check with Cluster Lifecycle and Tim and others and see if we can create a KEP.
Okay. Like for example, in terms of prior art, one of the other KEPs that we have discusses how we're going to break up the tests tarball from one Mondo tarball that has the tests for every single platform into a tarball per platform. This matches what we did for the Kubernetes tarball, but there were still enough finicky details in it that it was really worthwhile to write out a KEP to detail what was going to land in this release.
Yeah. Yeah, as said, I will check with them again on this and keep you all posted.
Okay. Does anybody have any remaining questions or open discussion things? So generally, I've given y'all the remainder of these minutes to do with whatever you want, and we can do that again. But one thought I had was, since we are at the halfway mark, and we have 38 people on this call, I'm kind of curious how you think it's going. And so we have a retro doc that, Jeff, if you could be my savior again and maybe help type things out in the retro doc if we mention some things, which I'm going to link in chat, but it's also linked in the meeting notes. I'm kind of really curious for all of the shadows who showed up and were really interested in helping out, whether or not you feel as though you are actually getting a chance to help out, or if you're still confused about what's going on here. Does anybody want to throw their lead under the bus?
In bug triage, we haven't really begun in earnest, so it feels a little bit hard to be able to judge whether or not we're being useful or not. I will say that Nico's been good at communicating with us and using the time that we have before our work really begins to try and help out the project as much as possible. So while I haven't been able to contribute to the automation work as much as I'd like, I think that we've been effectively used pretty well.
I can speak up on behalf of the enhancements team. So we've done quite a large amount of work, and I would, Claire's been great with communicating, keeping us up to date with all the process, and then delegating out work items to, there's 3 shadows. So I would say Claire has done a fantastic job with giving us all bits of work and control, and then communicating the bits throughout the process as we all come to learn it. So kudos to Claire, but I think I'd certainly feel empowered as a shadow with pieces of the process. So Claire has done a great job with that.
All right, so this is Sunday for SigDoc. So far, this is my first introduction to Kubernetes in terms of the community itself. But Jim has been very, very helpful in terms of communication. Like, I see his notification like 1 a.m. in the morning, like, ooh. So he's been very, very in terms of communication and guidance. That's my.
We are indeed a 24-hour project.
On my end, with the CI Signal team, Maria has been really amazing. And if anything, another comment that I would like to add is, for example, when you guys, when the previous team was looking for shadows and everything for 114, what was it, like 200 people showed up and volunteered for something. At least in CI Signal, it will be, I think, a little bit useful to expand the team. I don't know if in terms of shadows, but actually get a lot more people and distribute the work. So if somebody wants to become a new contributor, you can tell him, hey, we just opened this new issue because something is failing. Take ownership on that, work with the SIG, like directly work with the SIG, and get something out of the process and help out.
Cool. Something I'll say on that point, and this is maybe just my personal opinion. A long time ago, at the beginning of the project, we had a person called Build Cop who was responsible for tracking if the build was broken and then doing whatever it took to fix it. It was really hard on that person's mental health and personal life. So it was a rotating role, and eventually we got rid of it because it was too hard on people, and we had moved to a place where most of the reasons that the build would break were being caught in pull requests. Except now we have a CI Signal role that's now spread out amongst a team of people, where you are responsible for figuring out what tests are failing and then who those tests belong to, and then asking them kindly to please fix their tests. And part of me wonders if this isn't a responsibility that should actually live with the SIG itself, where some SIGs have, I know SIG Docs, for example, has a PR wrangler role where it's their responsibility to make sure that all of the PRs are generally headed in the right direction, but just for their SIG. It would be useful or educational to understand how many SIGs actually are aware of what tests they're responsible for, and if they have people dedicated to keeping those tests passing or not. Because I feel like, George, what you're asking for a larger team of CI signal people could also be satisfied by having all of the SIGs responsible for keeping their tests passing. But it's you know, a push versus pull mechanism, I guess. And it's definitely something that would be super helpful. Because again, this is something we have tried to automate away in the past. So we have tons of data about what tests are passing and failing, and we can have bots auto-file issues based on all of this, but people don't seem to pay attention to that for some reason. I see one of my shadows here. Ben, are you sure you don't want to like maybe say something nice about me? Or you could throw me under the bus, like whichever. Oh, he's on mute. Anybody else? Okay, I won't belabor the point. Oh, Jeff.
I was going to say, if there was nothing else, did we want to hop back to the shadow selection survey thing that Jim was bringing up?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's.
Oh, okay.
So, Jim, you said you wanted some review of the actual questions. Is that right?
Yeah, so I don't have them drawn up just yet. Like I said, I plan on it being 4 or 5 questions, pretty open-ended, looking for feedback. So I know when we got the 200 or so responses, I filtered it down. I think there was probably like between, I'd say 30 to 50 in docs. So we selected the 5 shadows, and then the remaining I took Hans' suggestion from the SIG release Slack, where he sent all the people that weren't selected, even if they chose they wanted to be involved in multiple roles, and said, hey, just because I don't have time or capacity to take you under as a shadow or a mentor doesn't mean you can't come to the SIG release meetings, doesn't mean you can't hang out in SIG docs, you can't pick up issues, be part of the community. And thinking that Hans is doing it his way, I'm doing it my way. I'm sure some of the other leads are doing it your own way, or however you're doing this. And I think that process is more of like a SIG release / SIG contribex, I guess question or problem to solve, where I think the response to those who aren't selected is a big opportunity to get more people in the community. And I wanted to see what people's thoughts were on how we move them from generally interested to being actively involved, even if they're not part of the release process. So that's where my mindset is, but I don't have any questions to speak of yet, but it won't be more than 5, I don't think.
I completely agree with that. Like part of me wants to say that it's almost a kinder, gentler ride if you're not on the release team, because things will get pretty intense as you get to burn down to actually keep up with everything. So if you just want to help out, there's so many places on this project that people could help out. I'm not sure that there's anything super special about the release team, although that said, we do seem to have a bit of a leads and shadows thing going on, that it's unclear to me how much other SIGs do that sort of explicit mentorship thing. But as you said, how that relationship works between lead and shadow is very dependent upon the person who's the lead. Maybe some shadows feel like they're not getting any mentorship at all from their leads, or some shadows feel like, yeah, they have a great weekly standing meeting and a wonderful relationship, and they're being taught all sorts of things. It's kind of unclear to me what level of consistency we have there and what the right balance is. Okay, well, thank you again, Jim, for taking the lead on putting together that questionnaire. And if anybody has questions about like how they can help out, just show up to the SIG release Slack channel and ask, and I'm sure there are plenty of things that can be done.
Yeah, and one last thing I'll add, if there's anyone out there as a lead or a shadow who has any questions that we'd like to garner some feedback on, feel free to leave a comment on that issue that I linked in the meeting minutes today. So if there's anything that you're interested in getting feedback on, like I said, I'm going to send this out to the SIG release team or the SIG release channel on Slack, probably Contribex, and then I'm going to send it to my shadows, and I'd suggest you send it to your shadows as well, so you can just kind of get a full kind of picture of what that shadow selection process looks like, and hopefully get some feedback on room for improvement. And at the end of the day, maybe we want to leave it to the leads to respond to all the people that are not selected, or maybe want to kind of rally around a Contribex, like they submit something to everybody as a unified message to onboard people or to get them involved with this project. So if you have any questions or any feedback, feel free to leave a comment on the issue.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. You get 5 minutes back to do whatever you want with. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.